My guest this week has a fantastically diverse background. He's extremely entrepreneurial. These days, he's into private equity and venture capital. He's got a great value set based on strong family and religious principles and a really diverse set of experiences. He started out as an actuary in insurance and risk and has worked through Big Four professional services with a couple of different firms, and now runs his own private equity and venture capital company with some partners. His name's Komeil Alibai, and I met him through coaching training. We were in the coaching training program together. Subsequently, I've actually done some coaching with him where he kindly allowed me to coach him. And it's really generous of him on this particular conversation to allow us to talk about that, because coaching is something that usually is very confidential between the coach and the client, and not something that gets discussed. But he talks and we talk a bit about the value of coaching and what it actually means. But before all of that, we talk a lot about his background, his experiences, the same kind of question set that I've used for a lot of my other interviews. And he's got some terrific answers and some really great insights that I'm sure you're going to find very valuable and really enjoy. I'm Bob Judson. You're listening to Leading for Life Stories, and let's get to it. Well, hey, Komeil, it's fantastic to have you on the podcast. I'm really glad to see you again. It's been a while, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's actually a pleasure seeing you again, and it's always nice to be able to be part of the initiative that you're running.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate your time. I think, and obviously I know a bit about what you've done and the journey you've been on, which has been an exciting and interesting one, but our listeners don't. So as a starter, could you just give a bit of a short summary of your career so far?
Absolutely. Maybe it might be worth me just starting from where I am at the moment. More recently, I started a private equity kind of venture capitalist firm that we focus on entrepreneurship through acquisition. We focus on buying small and medium-sized businesses, and we manage them, grow these businesses, and essentially with the aim of building a portfolio. And currently, we have investment in real estate and manufacturing, with the aim of growing that portfolio further. Fairly industry agnostic, but what we do is we tend to focus on the short and medium term on businesses that fit well together and marry well from a portfolio perspective. So complementary businesses that we focus on at the moment. Prior to setting up the venture capitalist private equity investment side of things, we have by qualification, I'm an actuary. Spent 15 years in the insurance and risk space, which was essentially training ground for what we're doing right now, and hopefully will help in future endeavors.
Yeah, that's quite a change. That sounds like, I'm no expert here, but that does feel like quite a big jump from being an actuary, and it'd be great just backtrack a bit to where you've worked previously doing that, because I think that's interesting in itself. But making that kind of jump, how did that feel?
I'm not going to lie, it's been an interesting change. It's one that I would have liked to believe that I was prepared for, but I don't think I was prepared for to the full extent of the change. Like in terms of background, I think I come from an entrepreneurial family historically. So my grandfather, both grandfathers on both sides, maternal and paternal, were very serial entrepreneurs in the way that they set things up. My father was a bit of an outlier who went down the academic and medical route. So I had a mix of both, essentially. But I think it felt like me coming back home in terms of going through that journey knew that the entrepreneurship is something that I really want to focus on. And I think throughout my career, it was the various elements that took place, which helped me focus on the fact, with the end goal in mind, you pick up certain skills that are going to be useful in the process. But it hasn't been easy. I'm not going to lie. It's been an interesting shift in culture, in style of leadership, and it's been one to learn a lot from.
Yeah, no, I can completely believe that. Fascinating. I mean, having set my own company up as well, I know the sort of challenges and opportunities. I mean, it's great. I find the freedom fantastic from doing that, but it certainly brings its own share of challenges as well in terms of security of where things are going and everything else. Yeah, you touched on the family piece there. So when you go right back to the beginning and talk about motivations and preparing for the start of your career, was that largely family motivation, or what else was behind it?
I think from the entrepreneurship journey's perspective, there was one person one family member who I never met, who was greatly influential in the path that I took, and he was my uncle who passed away before I was born. And he essentially set up the family business back in the Middle East a very long time ago. And he started very basic as being an exclusive agent for some of the bigger players, and slowly and gradually climbed the ladder and built quite a sizable business where our family was one of the bigger importers and exporters of various goods. They used to focus on exporting dates to the South Asian region, and they used to import spices from India, and essentially that's what they used to do. And they did become quite big for their time. And I think it was just a mindset that he had, and the growth mindset that he had in terms of wanting to build something that doesn't just serve himself, which was very inspiring. To be very honest, a lot of the endeavors, a lot of the ability for a lot of the kids in the family to be able to be educated were funded through that business, and it really left a mark on me in terms of what kind of legacy we're going to be behind. And I think that's where I was mainly inspired by in terms of family. And on my mum's side of the family, I think my grandfather, one of the things that he taught me was he kind of drilled in the elements around the fear of failure, where he taught us how not to be fearful of that. And essentially, I think we've spoken about this in the past as well, in terms of failures are generally lessons learned, and that's where he started off. And I remember him saying something to me. He said, just remember one thing: you'll start with nothing. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to end up with nothing. And if you don't try, you'll never know. So I think that was one of those were the people who actually gave me the push. I think again, my father, although he was an academic, he always liked the idea of the business, and he was very big on essentially indirectly coaching me on what my uncle had done previously, and kind of drilling that into us and building this. And maybe he might, if I was to meet him in real life, I might have been a bit disappointed, because my father probably made him sound much bigger than he actually was. But I think for us, it's been one of those things that maybe my dad influencing that decision-making process as well.
No, I'm sure he would have probably lived up to the expectation by the sounds of it. And it's a great family story, and fantastic that it was so successful. So did you moved across from the Middle East to work in the UK, or what?
I have had a very mixed past. So I was born and brought up in Iran, which is where my family we're second generation Iranians. So although we are classed as Iranians, my grandfather was from the South Asian region, so he was from India. So they were just traders who moved across from country to country. And I think they settled in Iran, and that's how I was like my father and myself were born in Iran. But I did my primary and to a certain extent secondary schooling in Iran. After which I moved to Pakistan, and speaking to an ex-member of the armed forces, I think the reasoning behind that might not be very much to your liking, but I was trying to get away from doing my military service in Iran, essentially because what happens in Iran is if you don't succeed academically, or you have a lull in your academic lifetime, you tend to get drafted in for national service. And the younger you are, the higher risk the role, the positions that you're being put in. And essentially, that being one of the factors that was worrying for my parents as well. They wanted to get me out of Iran as soon as possible. So I moved to Pakistan for 2 years. After which I kind of at that point moved from a Farsi medium of education to an English one, and that kind of set me up for coming to the UK. And I came to the UK and I studied here for 6 years. And after finishing my bachelor's, I went back to the Middle East. So a bit of going back home, but I was based in the UAE at this time. And then moved back to the UK around 8 years ago. And I blame my wife for that.
Well, yeah, that's a good reason, though, probably. Yeah, it's a very good reason.
No, I think it was one of those things where the life in the Middle East, although it felt like home, there are nuances to life, especially in the Gulf region, which you realizing that you'll always be an expat and you'll never be a local in the country, makes me personally feel a bit unsettled, which is why I was keen on moving to a place where I could call home. And given that I spent my the formative, developmental formative years in the UK, UK always felt like home for me, so it was coming back.
Yeah, well, interesting. Very, very migratory lifestyle you had at the outset. That's for sure.
I just hope I can stay settled for a while now. So we'll see.
I think it's great, though, isn't it? I mean, you one of the things I found when I was in the military was moving around a lot, seeing a lot of different places. I mean, it gives you perspectives. Particularly when you actually go to, as I obviously did, to some places which probably wouldn't be on the top of the tourist destination list. You definitely get a perspective of life around the world in a different way to if you're just spending either all your time in your own country or when you do go abroad, you're going very much to holiday destinations and doing tourist things, which is nothing wrong with that. But I think it broadens your mind in a different way to have lived elsewhere and experience what that's like and some of the challenges that it throws up, and indeed the opportunities it throws up as well.
Definitely. I think I'm a big believer in everything in life happens for a reason, and all the moves I couldn't be more thankful for, although at the point it felt out of necessity. It's proven to have its own value, like you said, in terms of building up an understanding of how things work differently in different parts of the world, and you bring that wealth of experience with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at your career transition journey, and you didn't specifically mention it, but I know you've obviously worked in big corporates as an actuary before you set yourself up on your own, and you then made the transition that you've described into what's clearly quite a multifaceted business and quite diverse in terms of what you're focusing on. What advice would you offer to others who are potentially either thinking about or have already embarked on going down that same path?
I think one of the one of the so just I'm not trying to in any way. Obviously, I don't think I am in a position to give that kind of advice to anyone, given that I am fairly early on in my own journey. But what it did for me is in the corporate life. Essentially, I started my corporate journey in the Middle East with Deloitte. So that's where we have a shared common background between yourself and myself.
We do indeed.
We come from the green dot family. But essentially, that was an interesting journey, just to be able to sharpen your toolkit in terms of having an understanding. And I think a lot of people who are going through that journey, where they know that the end goal is for them to be part of an entrepreneurship lifestyle, they tend to know that from the beginning, from when they join the corporate. I don't think it's something that is developed over a period of time. You go in with that mindset, say, I am only here to build up my skill set. And I think from an advice perspective for people like that, there is a level of frustration that comes with that as well, because the longer you stay in that corporate journey, which is 15 years for myself, there is an element of, if you haven't made that entrepreneurship move, you have that element of frustration that comes in. The biggest advice for people would just be, is patience and knowing that opportunity will come up. If you are on the lookout for it, is trusting the process, and it will come up. It might not come in the form that you expect it to come up, which for me it didn't. But it does pay dividends. That patience does pay dividends a lot.
Yeah, no, I can completely see that, and I can recognize what you say there about the entrepreneurial mindset, because there was a colleague of mine that was at Deloitte who left to go into set up her own business and actually work alongside or with a founding partner, and I think she had always had that view that this was part of her journey, and a bit similar to you actually. She had an entrepreneurial family background and thought, right, okay, this was definitely a skill set builder to get myself better prepared to actually go and take on the wider world. And one of the things about firms like Deloitte and KPMG, obviously I know you work for as well, I mean, are great for that. I mean, inevitably they give you a whole set of perspectives and expose you to a lot of other clients and so on. So yeah, it's definitely a plus.
Definitely. I think one of the comments that one of my cousins had made was, because we all, given that we are from our entrepreneurship setting, a lot of my cousins are also, they kind of run and have their own businesses. And I just remember there was this commonality amongst us where we were of the opinion that if we work in corporate the rest of our lives, or work for somebody, or work for a company for the rest of our lives, we're the kind of people that the day, once we retire, we'd probably just buy ourselves an office and put our feet up. We'd probably clean the office ourselves and serve ourselves. Be the only man in the office would say, you know what, I died in my own office essentially. So essentially, it's a morbid way of looking at it, but yeah, it is one of those things, just to feel that sense of achievement that it is your own turf that you're on.
Yeah, I know what you mean completely. When I found it interesting going from senior roles in the military to corporate life at Deloitte initially, where it was a definite mindset shift, big time. I mean, and I was, as a director in Deloitte, so I was in a reasonably senior position there, but obviously as not as a partner, so therefore no accountability and all the bits that go with that. And that was a really big change. And of course, I was working in a completely different world in terms of people. It was very diverse, very much younger organization. I think the average age in Deloitte globally when I was there was something ridiculous. It was 20, 26 or 28, because they would hire so many graduates. And they keep them for a lengthy period of time. So that was definitely a change. But equally, the jump to then being independent, the thing that's great about it is the freedom it offers you. The fact that if I want to take time off, I take time off. If I want to focus on something completely different, I can do that. But at the same time, come the challenges that you've obviously got to manage your own pipeline. You have no security. You have no kind of redundancy package if something goes wrong, or any other parachute that you can can deploy. So there are definitely a bunch of those kind of challenges that you have to bear in mind.
No, I think
sure.
you've hit the nail on the head in that sense in terms of accountability. So I'm going through that journey in reverse, essentially, to a certain extent. I feel that in the military, you had accountability is kept at an all-time high. Every decision that you make has potential up to them. Well, I came from and then you moved into corporate, where you the accountability to a certain level was a bit dependent on others, like partners in the business. But I think I've gone through the opposite, where in the corporate world, the accountability was to yourself and your immediate team, just as an extent. Into the acquisition and entrepreneurship to acquisition space, there is a completely different mindset shift, and which I've learned to appreciate more and more in the process. One thing I noticed when I stepped into this role was there is no more brainstorming. So in the role that you play as business owner, chairman of the board, whatever you say, even if it is a bad idea, is something that people take very serious and they want to implement, which is not necessarily very helpful for people like ourselves who've been in the corporate world, where we like brainstorming and let's have a few ideas on the table. But I think over here, there is that cultural shift, and you recognizing that whatever you say is being taken as an instruction, as opposed to you just brainstorm. So it's been an interesting learning curve for myself.
Yeah, that's a great segue into my next question, actually. But just before I get to that, I think I found all the time in the Air Force, particularly in command roles, where you could kind of commit thought crime because you could vocalize something that you just, as you walk past something on the base or whatever, and you make a comment about it. And the next thing is you'll go back and you'll find it had changed. And actually that's because somebody had picked up on your comment and thought, well, he doesn't like that. No, we need to change it. I didn't say that. I wasn't meaning you to do anything. I was just thinking out loud. And it's the same. Yeah. And I think putting ideas on the table is the same thing. It's definitely about not too much of you shaping the thinking before you get the thoughts of others, because otherwise it does stymie the thoughts of others. And particularly if you're, I think the military was obviously more obvious an example of where this was a risk. You could be in a position that people thought that was what you wanted to do, and therefore they're not going to turn around and come up with alternatives. But creating the conditions to turn around and make sure they are providing lots of alternatives and giving you a kind of rounded decision set that you can then discuss and shape and ultimately rule on is much more helpful. So that's great. But the next question, as I say, it was a great segue into it, was about leadership styles and moving as you have through the various things you've done into now running your own business and clearly having people working for you and around you. How have you adapted and shaped your style across your career?
So I think in the corporate world, I feel that there is there seems to be a prescriptive way of building up to that leadership role, and there's a lot of places where I feel one of the things I really did not want to carry on with me going forward was is the fact that I came from a very technical industry. So what used to happen was that if you qualify as an actuary and you will have a number of post-qualification year experience, you tend to take on a managerial role or a leadership role. But that doesn't necessarily make you a good leader, because as a leader, you're managing people. And just because your technical capabilities are very sound does not mean that you will be able to manage people under you. And I think I came from an industry that was very heavily focused on that piece. and to a certain extent made me think that this is not what I would like to see in business. But just by nature, I know that the type of person that I am, and I think we during our coaching kind of training together, I think one of the things that we were exposed to was the identifying your personality type. And for me, that day was an eye-opening day because it made me realize my personality type is much more of an influencer, one who likes to build a team, and I don't like doing things alone as a lone wolf. I believe in the strength of partnerships, and I feel that is kind of rallying the troops is what I do really well. And during my life, in the corporate life as well, we had some challenging times in terms of, I'm sure you've been there where you working till late, like early hours of the morning, and then you're back in the office again at 8 o'clock to kickstart things, and that happened for a 2-3 month period while you got a project to deliver. But one thing that was commented on while I was there, while I was doing that, was my team members were always all there. So we had 100% attendance, even if it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And I think that is just dependent on that leadership, where you can inspire people to do that alongside you. Might not be the most healthy way of doing things, but you knowing that you're not alone in that journey is really helpful. And we had a bit of a I don't know whether it's the correct term or not, but it was a bit more of a no last person standing. Essentially, if someone has to work late, then we all work late alongside each other. I think one of those, as I came into the entrepreneurial setup and doing things, initially my entrepreneurial journey was fairly lone wolfish in terms of when I set up the real estate company. It was you are building a team, but not necessarily a team that works for you. You're just making many people work together in the right way to get deals across the line, make sure the property is managed well. But then when we came into the entrepreneurship for acquisition, that is when I partnered up with a very good friend of mine, and that has been probably the best decision I have ever made in terms of stepping into a business and realizing it's never going to be myself alone to be able to manage everything on my own. And we have coming into this, the leadership style has had to change somewhat, where you can be that driver, but there is also limits to what you can do. Like you said, if you come in as the commander, if you say this bin is in the wrong place, and then you see next day you come back and you see people have moved the bin, it's a bit different. The leadership style over here is much more of mission driven. So it's very much the overarching mission and holding people accountable to particular KPIs. And it's less hands-on and involved in dragging everyone along the journey with you. It's trusting the process that people will work in different ways. And I think that's where me understanding other leaders in the organization has been very, very helpful. And then again, I think it's also understanding the difference in leadership, where I know, so I have a partner who helps with the organic growth of the businesses. And I also have a managing director of one of the businesses that we bought that has pretty much joined the team on the mission that we are on in terms of growing the business to a certain level. And we all have very different roles, but we also have very different styles of leadership. So the other two are very outcome driven. So very much focus on the outcome, and whatever route they take, they will get there. And that's very common in a small and medium sized business setup, where you have a goal that you need to reach and you will do whatever it takes or whatever route that you have to take. me coming in from a corporate setup, and my mindset is much more of a process-driven setup, and I am very much focused on getting the right processes in place. And as long as the right process is in place, I will be happy, or I will be content with whatever the outcome is. So I am very much more back-end focused, and therefore I'm very much front-end focused, which brings it makes for a very vibrant conversation in our meeting. But it is definitely helpful to see both sides of things. So I think when it comes to growing a business and setting scale to a business, it's very helpful. Me coming in with a corporate setup and trying to set the systems and processes in place to be able to meet that scale. And in the near term, you need people like my partners who set up the immediate outcome focused goals that they get to.
Yeah, so many great points in there. I think that that last one, I mean, it is a team thing. And if you have people who have complementary skills, you need to harness those complementary skills. And if you don't do that, you inevitably are less efficient than you would otherwise be. If you're just the ideas people and you're kind of light bulbs going off here, there and everywhere and which might be fantastic, but actually if you don't put any process behind it and you don't actually have an implementation plan that takes you along the journey to get you to where you need to be, then those ideas will just be ideas, because there won't be a plan, there won't be any kind of sensible delivery option that takes it there. And right back at the beginning, one of the things that you said struck a real chord with me, where I think I talk about this quite a bit, that I think one of the challenges in the corporate world with leadership is that a lot of corporates, and this is not a slight on them in any way, it's just the way it is, focus on business skills and business delivery and promote people based on business delivery. And so if you're good at your job, if you're hitting the sales targets and you're winning more clients and you're delivering on time and you're getting high customer satisfaction ratings, etc., then you're likely to do well in the organization. At some point along that journey, you suddenly find you're leading people, and the preparation given to you to lead people, in my experience, is very, very mixed. And it is something that I think could be so much better. That's where people like me come in, I suppose, if we, in terms of helping. But I just think that it is a real weakness, because it's not necessarily that the people themselves are inadequate. They just haven't been well prepared to turn around and lead individuals. And so they don't have the right kind of approach and skill set and so on. And to your point about no last man standing, I mean, I think that's, you can argue till the cows come home about whether it's the right approach to work really late, or whether you should just turn around and say, well, actually, we're going to do this tomorrow. And I think both things are right. It depends on the circumstances. Exactly. But one thing I think is absolutely great in what you said is the whole one team ethos thing. Because there are too many leaders I've seen who, will issue instructions about this, that, and the other's got to be done. And the team know that then they've got to deliver this by tomorrow morning or whatever. And then, right, sorry, got to junk it to go and attend, and leave the team to do it, which is setting completely awful example. So I think if you are there with your sleeves rolled up as part of the team, as a leader, at least most of the time, I think, the team will probably recognize that, perhaps not all the time, because they probably don't want you there all the time, but actually being in a position where you have set the right example and they know that there's a good reason why you're not doing it, as opposed to it's just you think it's beneath you to do the kind of work you've asked them to do. That's a great sort of set of examples to build on.
And I think it gets reciprocated to a certain extent as well, in the sense that I remember there were many a times where there was no requirement for some of the team members to stick around, and just because you're sticking around, there's that reciprocal respect where they just go, okay, let's just have dinner together, and then we'll continue working. Let's get through this, and then we'll deliver. So I think, like I said, it just builds that one team nature where everyone stands for each other.
Yeah, although interestingly, and I do think there's something to be careful about as a leader there as well, where if you're setting the conditions where you work long hours, pretty quickly all your staff will work long hours, and when I first went to a job out of the cockpit, actually, I went to a job in the Ministry of Defence. The guy that I was working for, I've never forgotten what he said to me. He said, "You need very early on to have a standardized arrival time and a standardized departure time." And I was commuting by train into and out of London, so that was relatively easy to do. And the reason he said it is because if you don't do that, then if you start arriving very early and you leave very late, then very quickly people will expect you to do that, and they'll be disappointed if they suddenly come in at 7:00 at the night, to looking for you and you're not there, even though it's a completely unreasonable thing to be disappointed about. They'll kind of think, well, you're always there. Why aren't you there today? And actually, I think as a leader, it's even more important you do that. You make sure that your team are not seeing you working 15 hours a day every day. And I mean, you may have to do 15 hours in a day, but do it somewhere else.
That's exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head on that one, because I remember. So this in the corporate career, I was at the other end of the spectrum, which is very much like what you said. I would stay the late hours to be able to make sure things are done, and your team tends to support you and get on board. Ever since our most recent acquisition, I've been working with our managing director very, very closely, and she is how I was in the corporate world, where she would work those late hours. And it's come to a stage where I know I'm doing the complete reverse, where I stand at her door at around 6:00, and I'm like, if
go
you
home.
want to finish this together, let's go home. I'm not leaving you in the office all alone. So we will pack up and we'll leave the parking lot together. And her response is, "But I'm going to have to do the work at home." And I said, "Well, if that allows, if you are able to do that at home, and that's the requirement, I completely understand. But go home, because you need to change the scene and change the setup." And a lot of times it feels much better, you knowing that you can still go home, be your family, and once there is sleep, you can log back in and do the work that you need to do. But at least you have an element of life balance, work-life balance that comes in. Sometimes it's just reading a story to the little one before going to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking a break, getting a change, clearing the air. Again, I've talked and written about this quite a bit, and I think that is so important in terms of managing the way that you approach your life. I talk quite a lot about examples when I was in the military, where there is a risk that everything runs at figuratively 110%. You're particularly on operations. You've got nowhere else to go. You're on a usually behind the wire in some kind of encampment where the thing runs 24/7. No question about it. When I was running Kandahar Airfield in Afghanistan, would be a great example of that, where everyone was very driven, very focused. The operation ran 24/7, literally, and it was a really, really busy operation. But the problem was, certainly when I arrived, they'd just gone through a very busy period, and my predecessor had no option but to do this. But we'd suddenly gone into a period where it wasn't quite so mad. And I said, right, stop. We need to change this, because people need time to get some recharge in the batteries. And the analogy I use is like a lamp. If you turn the wick up on a lamp and it's for flames burning really, really brightly, then it can only do that for so long. You need to turn it down so it's got a sustainable, continual level, so you've got the ability to turn it up when you actually need to turn it up. Because there will be times when you need people to turn around and turn to and deliver that 110%. But if you try and do that all the time, then
you're going to burn out.
you'll burn out, and B, you have no additional capacity. You have not. So when something else happens, you are already running so hot that you have nowhere else to go. And I think in any organization, it's good practice to think about how do we actually turn around and have a genuine business as usual pace, and then a sort of step it up if you really need to.
Exactly. No, I completely agree with that.
Hey, when you look back then with where you've got to so far and the complicated, peripatetic background you had moving around, if you were advising a school-age Komeil now, what would you be saying?
I think it's a really good question. looking back at where I was, I wouldn't. I'm one of those people who, like I said, I believe I am here where I am because of what life has thrown at me and where I've been. But had I, and there isn't an element of regret in any way, but I think from a perspective of advice that I would probably give myself as a school-going kid, when we were in school, there was a big focus on competition, and while that I respect a lot, but I don't think it was the most healthy type of competition. I think there is an element of you pitching yourself against your peers to a certain extent, but I think it's recognizing that your biggest competition is yourself. There is that focus on you recognizing yourself and your own abilities and trying to outperform your own abilities, which then inherently means that you're playing your best game and you're competing against others. I think using peers as a measure of what is possible that you could achieve is a good measure. But I think your main competition is against yourself. And I think this was a very interesting, I was listening to one of these podcasts, but I think it was Simon Sinek who was talking about Microsoft versus Apple. And I think one of the things that he said that he went to see Microsoft, and they launched their PDA or something like that at that point, which was more of a tablet kind of focused phone thing, and they gifted him one as someone who's going to visit the place. And there was a lot of promotion around what they're doing and how they're doing it. After he did Microsoft, he went on to see Apple, and expecting the same kind of treatment, where he would probably be gifted a new device that they had launched, and them talking all about their device and how it does against competitors, Microsoft being one of them. And to his surprise, he didn't get anything, and the conversation never even cropped up in terms of how their device is better than their competitors. And he spoke to one of the senior leaders in the organization, and he said, why is it that I get different stories and I could different companies? And I mean, Microsoft spoke, and he was very open. He said, look, as Apple, we don't compete with anyone. We are just there to be the best at what we do. And through that, we have managed to capture a market share that everyone is envious about. But the reality is we don't really look the Samsungs and the Microsoft to be able to match their technology or their capabilities. We're just there to make sure that the user has the best experience using our product. And I think that is testament to how Apple has actually grown its business. In terms of when you go to buy a MacBook or when you go to buy an iPhone, from a technological standpoint, they might be inferior to the likes of Samsung and LG. But in terms of end product delivery and customer satisfaction, I think Apple definitely take the win on that one. And I think that's why they do really well.
Yeah, Simon Sinek talks about Apple a lot in that context, doesn't he? As one of these brands that they basically people are just complete devotees. I mean, he says talking to you on a Mac and with an iPhone in front of him and all that sort of thing. So I have definitely, I've gone down the Apple route, and I get that totally. I think the other thing is, it's interesting with companies like that. Tesla's another one actually, where they don't advertise because they don't need to advertise. Yeah. When was the last time you saw an Apple advert? They're hardly ever out there. I mean, you may see occasional ones when they've launched a new phone or whatever, but TV advertising is much, much rarer. Whereas some other products that feel they've got to step up to meet them, I think it's a slightly different space, isn't it? It is interesting.
Definitely.
And it's interesting in your conversation about talking to your younger self about competition, because I think the other thing that is all too often, I suppose, pushed to the back a little bit, not least by the education system in this country, is competition. And trying to turn, no, we need to be much more egalitarian. We need to turn around and get rid of that. And I just fundamentally disagree. I mean, I'm of the view that life's competitive. Absolutely. Life is very competitive. That is interesting. When I interviewed for this podcast, I interviewed General David Petraeus, and he was very clear on that. He said life is a competition. There's no prizes for being average. And I think that is so true. And people need to remember that. That's true for virtually every aspect of what you do.
I completely agree with that, because I think when it's that competitive element is always there. Essentially, I think one of those is understanding what you're capable of and what your body is capable of, or what you are mentally capable of. Is looking around and seeing the likes of your Elon Musk and looking at your Charlie Mungers, that Berkshire Hathaway is out there for us, where we say, okay, it's been done, and if it's been done there, and it is very much of a model that can work. Now it's up to you what you do with you knowing that is out there. You can go out and beat that record, or you can stand back and be content, which for me personally, I struggle with in that sense, because I think life is all about growth. I think one of the questions you mentioned earlier as well, in terms of the influences in life, and I mentioned my uncle, but I think I split that into two in terms of the influences in my life is people and principles. And for me, there is an element of you look up to certain people in your life, and maybe not directly in your life, who you use as role models or as mentors. And then there are certain principles by which you live. And for me, a lot of my principles come from the faith that I was brought up in. And one of those is that I am going to be answerable for what I have done in this life. And for me, it's very important to make sure that if I have been gifted with intellect, I'm maximizing my intellect. Or if I've been gifted with a physical ability, I am able to maximize that. To be able to have a legacy that is not just dependent on me. Because if I can live my best life and I can live my best self and to my fullest potential, then I can that in itself is a legacy that's going to be passed over year on year.
No, great examples. I totally agree. And I think having that kind of focus, long-term focus, whether it's faith-driven or some other sort of sense of purpose in your life, is so important. I think particularly actually as you get older, the whole hanging on to having a purpose is a really, really important feature. There are too many people who get to the end of whatever career they've pursued, and suddenly they're kind of in this vacuum because they're going, well, I've kind of done that. What am I going to do now? And finding a new purpose, having a regeneration of that, and being focused on something, I think for your mental well-being is massively, massively important. That's for sure.
Definitely.
When you look back at your career so far, we're into the sort of highs and lows part of the world now. What do you wish you'd done differently, and why?
In terms of my career path, I think, and this is again no dig at the corporates of the world and how they run their businesses. I felt that in a corporate setup, it's the system is very much getting in line and following suit. I felt that there was less room for your personal self and your own style of working or your own approach to things, which I completely can understand from a big corporate perspective, because you want things done in a certain way, in a certain process, and I can completely appreciate that in the long run. But I think it's recognizing for myself in my own career, it would have been recognizing that earlier enough that I wouldn't have tried to mold myself too much to that corporate setup and the way that I approach things. And I think the reality dawned upon me when I left the corporate world as to how much that had influenced the way I look at things and the way I approach problems, for instance. And for me, to a certain extent, it did challenge, because you second guess yourself. I'm very much of, I know I have a gut feel about a certain aspect, and I can justify that, but I might not justify it in the in the way that my employer would have liked to see it. So for me, I started second guessing myself on a lot of the gut feels and what I was trying to get to, and I felt like I had to go from zero up at the top down, and you lose a bit of confidence in your own decision making. And I think that is something that I would, if I could go back and tell myself, is trusting the process to a certain extent, not adjusting myself too much to something that doesn't feel natural to myself.
Yeah. No, makes absolute sense. And I mean, conversely, then, what do you consider your most important achievement so far? I mean, in longer term, you talked already about purpose in life and everything else. What do you want your legacy to be?
I think, well, the probably the biggest turning point in my life has been from my personal life, and that was becoming a father. I think that was the point at which MYKA, it actually follows, although the company is by no means going to be my son, but it's just one where it had his initials on it, because I think from the point that he was born and me becoming a father was when I realized that sense of purpose and that sense of legacy. Although the entrepreneurship mindset was there from the beginning, and that desire to want to be an entrepreneur, but I think the purpose for which I wanted to be an entrepreneur was very different to what it is today. So I went down the traditional route of wanting to be an entrepreneur to better my own lifestyle and my own standard of living. And that purpose changed from the point that my little one was born, where I realized I'm living a life not for myself, and that it extends beyond him as well, and it extends beyond just my immediate family or my extended family. It's very much focused on making sure that whosoever we cross paths with in terms of within a business setup, it is something that we are giving back, and there is an impact to the community and the impact that we want to have long term. I have one of the things that is really interesting as well, and I'm very glad that myself and my partners have exactly the same mindset on, is when we look at a business and we are buying the business, obviously we look at it from a financial standpoint and we say, okay, finances need to stack up, the numbers need to stack up. But looking at it just purely from a numbers perspective doesn't necessarily do it justice. It's recognizing that business has 25, 30, 40 employees, and the success of that business means that the requirements for their families of the employees are being met, and you recognizing that they're essentially an extended part of your own family. So it's you realizing that you're putting food on people's table, and every decision that you make will impact the person right from the bottom to the top.
Yeah, that's again another great point. I can remember, I think that altruistic sense of your kind of greater purpose and the people you're employing, if you are employing people, and how much it matters and their livelihoods are in your hands, I think is something that, particularly in entrepreneurial terms, weighs very heavily. I mean, I don't employ anybody. I run my company, but it's just me. And I think you're right. There's a real responsibility. And I can remember years ago when the National Lottery first started in the UK, actually, which is more than 20 years ago now. There was a great story, lovely story, where a chap won quite early on, and he won the jackpot, which in those days was, I think it was, he won 18 million or something like that, which was still a huge amount of money. I mean, certainly in the late 90s, it was a huge amount of money. And he was a small business owner. He employed a bunch of people in a small factory manufacturing business, and he paid off all their mortgages with his lottery win, which I just thought was an amazing story, because it's just life-changing for those people. I mean, that Absolutely. Is the biggest thing, isn't it, in terms of a debt that is generally hanging over most people is their mortgage. So, to have that level of generosity and altruism and care about your people long term, I think matters hugely. If you're going to be in business at all, but I mean, certainly in a leadership part of the business, no, it's great.
I think you've touched upon a good point in that sense as well, and essentially being able to convey that message across to the next generation and so on. So I was having a conversation with my wife, and she said, "Would you expect the little one to join the business at some point?" I said, "I have no expectations of him joining the business. There is, however, if he does join the business, he needs to realize that he's just joining not as someone as a beneficiary of the business that automatically is entitled to that. It's him recognizing that he is. We have an approach where we say we just take enough for our sustenance, and then the rest is to be able to have an impact on the world, being able to set up a foundation where we can give back to for a greater cause, and whether that be investing in educational institutions to be able to make sure that we have the right scholarship programs for disadvantaged kids from disadvantaged backgrounds to be able to raise their standard of living. It needs to be greater than ourselves. It doesn't mean that I would hate for the MYKA mission to ever be seen one of greed.
I think I love your point about, he's got to kind of work his ticket in the business because I think it's really interesting when you look at some very well-known celebrities who've done exactly that with their children. They've turned around and said, look, I might be worth millions, but you've got to go and find your own way in life, and I think that's that in terms of the value of money and the importance of establishing that fairly early on. That is a really, really important life lesson, isn't it, for people who, just by virtue of circumstance, are born into a better off world, as it were. So that's really key. Conversely, on all of this, what's your career low point, and what did you learn from it?
I think career low point for me. There've been many actually. So the lowest point for me, which turned out to be the biggest changer for me, change in my career path, was when I was at KPMG, and I was doing well in the job description that I had, and I was fine on that basis. But I think one of the things that got highlighted to me quite late in my life was me recognizing my dyslexia, and rather than taking that news positively, that I've essentially competed with neurotypical people, being from a neurodiverse background, and doing fairly well out of that. I took it as I took that more as a hit, as to if had I have known earlier, would I have been at a different stage in my life? And I think that did have a great impact on my career as well, and me understanding myself, because I went through a bit of a low point, and I wouldn't call it a low point, but I think that when you have a recognition of an understanding of who you are, it takes a bit of time for you to understand the strength that role that self-realization brings. So you tend to go through a bit of a low point to be able to then bounce back quite far. And I think that is what then took me down the route of it kind of solidified the approach that I wanted to take in life. It made me realize that I am in a bit of a hurry in life, essentially. I recognized a lot of things about myself, understanding how I operate, what I do well, what I don't do well. But it also made me realize it challenged my approach to entrepreneurship, which was quite an interesting one, because I had been brought up in a community or extended community of people where our approach to business had always been that if you want to start a business, you need to go and start from scratch. You need to go and build up from the ground up, learn the skill. So if you want to set up a plumbing business, you need to go out, become a plumber, and then build up from one man to 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's how you grow businesses. But I think that realization, and I used to always challenge that in myself, because I know I am good at growing businesses and scaling up businesses, but I didn't know whether I would be able to start from scratch, essentially have the idea, execute on the idea, and build. And essentially that brought me to this whole world of entrepreneurship through acquisition, which was an eye-opener for myself, where I realized I can look at businesses that have been set up and have been operated by their respective founders for the past 20 years, but now they've come to a point where they want to retire. And there's a change in mindset between startup and scale up. And they have the startup mindset, but they don't have the scale up mindset. So, and I know I have the scale up mindset. So it creates that opportunity for people like myself to come in and say, okay, I can take your business that you've grown for the past 20 years and I can take it to the next level. And that's exactly where I started focusing on. And that opened up my eyes to a lot of things. So that low point in my career definitely brought about a lot of self-realization that then has now helped me being where I am today, where I never expected to be.
Yeah, that's a really great story, because it's so often true, isn't it? It's not about how hard you fall; it's how quickly you get back up, and bouncing back from adversity and learning from it as well, to actually be in a position where you've developed as a result of it, as opposed to it knocking you. Inevitably, it knocks you back, but then it's, if it knocks you back and then ultimately you emerge stronger from it, then that's a real plus. And so, no, that's a lovely story. You kindly allowed me to work with you as a coach some while back, which was really great. Can you firstly say a little bit about coaching? Because I just think that it's one of the areas, obviously, that I work in personally. And I'd be interested in your perspectives as someone who's also been going through a coaching qualification, but also actually has been coached. Yes. What you found useful about it, what it did for you personally, how it helped you, and just give a kind of perspective on that, if you wouldn't mind.
I think that's actually really helpful. But one of the things that we, well, firstly, I really enjoyed our time together, because I think you were part of that journey, that bounce back journey for myself as well, to a certain extent, that to where I came from and how that purpose became clearer and clearer to myself. But I think one of the things that coaching really offers is this opportunity for you to have a catalyst. So I see coaches as catalysts who just ask the right questions for you to do a lot of your own thinking. And one of the biggest turning points in my life was brought about by a coach that now knowing more about coaching, I might not rate his coaching style as much. But I think it was a question that he asked me once when I was doing my actuarial qualifications, and I was having these mixed feelings about wanting to be an actuary or being an entrepreneur and how I can fit that in and how that would work. And at that point, I'd made up my mind that I want to be an entrepreneur, but I had that mindset of I need to finish my actuary. I need to finish this qualification. And it was a specialization stage of the qualification. So I already had the basic stage, and it was just what specialization I'd go down. And I was struggling with some of these exams, and I spoke to him, and he just asked me a couple of questions which were very basic by nature, but it makes you think. And I think that's the beauty of coaching. He just highlighted, because to me, like, from what I'm hearing, you're telling me that you are trying to qualify qualify for a job by sitting these qualification exams for a career that you're looking to leave. and for a second, and he said, "Can I ask why?" And at that point, I was so stuck in my ways. I said, "Because I don't want to be seen as a quitter, and I don't want to be seen as someone who doesn't quit." And he said, "Why don't you want to quit?" And I said, "I don't want to quit because I want to be able to tell my son tomorrow that, you know what, things were hard, but I didn't quit." And then he said, "And you think your son would appreciate you being unhappy in life or trying to prove to him a point and make him unhappy in life to prove a point about it's okay, that you can't quit in life?" And at that point, it was a very tough pill to swallow at that point, but it made me realize that we innately start making decisions in life based on happiness as well. I go to a restaurant and I order a meal. I don't order a meal that's not going to make me happy and I have to finish. And quitting at the right time in something that you know that is not fitting the overall purpose, then it's perfectly fine. And I think coaching brought that thought process in. And I think it's the questions that are being asked from coaching. And I know coaching sometimes get a bad name for there being many coaches out there. Now, I've heard the term where you go like, now everybody's a life coach. And the reality is, yes, there are a lot of people who go through the qualification, but it's also the point of understanding who the right coach is for you and what a good coach can do for you. It made me realize someone who I would have as my personal coach, I would not necessarily have as my business coach. Mm-hmm. And I think that is you being able to be aware of that is important in the coaching scene. But from an understanding perspective, it's really helpful to have that accountability, the soundboard, who comes with no judgment on who you are, what you're trying to do, and for you to just discover your own solutions to your own problems, and you being empowered to go and change those it brings a completely new approach. And I think one of the, like you said, in terms of the qualification as well, even though you have gone much further in the coaching qualification than I have in that setup, but I think from what I did in the qualification, it made me realize how I am able to connect with others. And right now, I can hand on heart say that this is probably been the most beneficial trainings that I've ever done, because the way I've been able to speak to my partners and deal with the various stakeholders in the business, you employ a lot of coaching skills, because I don't come from the industries that I have. Like manufacturing is not my background, but I can still sit in a room and ask questions and understand not only for me to understand, but for everyone else in the room to understand any gaps or any developments that need to happen in the business, and purely coming from a coaching background. And I think that skill has been definitely one of the most useful skills that I've picked up, and I would vouch for it.
Thanks. No, it's really, really interesting stuff. I mean, a number of points. I love the catalyst description because I think that's right. I think, and I've actually, while I've been coaching, I've had one of those kind of light bulb moments with a client where it was really amazing because this was a lady who was looking to change roles and was just nervous about making the jump fundamentally. And she knew, I think she knew in her heart of hearts what she wanted to do. And I said to her, so, okay, what does life look like for you in a perfect world? What does life look for you in 12 months' time? And she came up with a list of things. And I just said to her, so which of those do you get by staying where you are? And there was this huge long silence. It was the classic, don't fill the white space, just let it settle a bit. And she eventually came back and said, none of them. And that was her light bulb moment. It was a complete, right, okay, I need to move. I can't, it was a total confirmation of it. And it was a catalyst thing. It was definitely, she probably might have got there, well, she probably would have got there on her own eventually, but it was about getting there quicker, in terms of accelerating the thinking. And I think the crowded market thing resonates with me as well, because I think it's true in coaching, where obviously it's an unregulated business, and therefore you've got lots and lots of people who've called themselves coaches, got no qualifications whatsoever, which I think is a bit disappointing. But so be picky about who you're going to have, and chemistry is really important. At the end of the day, if they don't fit you for the specific thing that you are interested in generic area. I think the thing that surprises me sometimes as well with coaching clients is they actually develop, and you start off with a particular set of goals and aspirations. Why do I want to have a coach? And actually that can change quite markedly over time, because it can open up other avenues and thought processes. But my wife often says to me as well, in the leadership development space, that obviously I try and occupy a lot these days. She said, well, it's a really crowded market. It's really difficult. I said, yeah, it is crowded, but it's also crowded with lots of people who actually may have academically done stuff around leadership. They may even have written books around leadership, but there's an awful lot of people in the space who are talking about leadership who've never led anything. Which is, and so the credibility bit, I think, I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think it really matters. If you're wanting to turn around and get someone to come and work with you as a leadership development person, use someone who's actually done some leadership, who's really
exactly.
Because if you don't, all you're getting is a kind of academic perspective, which might be, if that really is what you want, then fine. But I just think you'll get a much broader, more deeper perspective of someone who's genuinely got real stories of real things that have gone on.
And I completely agree with you on that front, because I think you get a lot of, and unfortunately, like you said, it gives coaching a bad name, because you have the minute you change your LinkedIn profile and the title changes, you automatically start getting these requests that can't start coming through, and I'm sure you've probably faced it as well. There is the number of coaches who have reached out to me, and I have looked at their profile, and they have, without being disrespectful to them, but they might have had an office admin job, who now feel that they can train CEOs on their mindset towards growth. Makes me cringe to a certain extent, because I said, can you prove to me that you have done this in the past? Like, for you, it's a very different story, because you've led teams, you've led in very high stressful environments. You have shown how leadership can make or break that team. And essentially now you coming in as a coach come mentor to a certain extent, because you are also imparting a lot of your own knowledge to say, this is what has happened to me in the past, which is a lot of value that people can get from. But if someone who hasn't run or a leadership role, or has not run, is trying to teach us how, or help us, or be the catalyst, I am sure that you are not You're not going to ask those critical questions that are needed for me to be able to come to those solutions.
No, you're right.
It's very important to find the right person.
You're right. And I think it's interesting because the military thing, I would be the first one to say that I don't think military leadership and military experience is relevant to all environments for sure. But I think there are lots of things that come from it that the parallels are really quite strong. I mean, it's very interesting, actually, when you look at corporates, the amount of people that talk about war gaming.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the other one is war stories, right? And they go, well, I've got actual war stories, So it's funny, isn't it, how they often draw into that space.
Definitely.
Just before we close on the coaching thing, I mean, is there any advice you would offer now to others who are thinking about getting a coach, but remain to be convinced? I mean, we've talked about some of this stuff, but any last thoughts from your side?
I think there is, again, my historical industry was very. They used to look at coaching as fluff. They used to call it very fluffy. But and I am to a certain extent I was guilty of the same, because I came into coaching and thinking about it in the same way, thinking that what benefit can I gain? But my advice to anyone I have gained a lot from it. And I think one of the things that coaching just does is that internal reflection. It just promotes that internal reflection and thought process that makes you get to your next stage of thinking, which is really helpful. And like you said, it just accelerates that, because if you are not by nature someone who reflects and ponders, coaching is one where it forces you into that role. So if someone out there is considering it, even if they might think that it's just fluffy, it is try those free sessions. People who are offering the free sessions, it's not necessarily a marketing gimmick. It's people who really believe in what they're offering and know that it's going to change your life. So I'm a big believer in trying it out, and what you have to do is really you lose probably 2 hours of your life.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. Just give it a try and see whether it works for you, because it definitely is. I've not had a client yet, actually, who's come away from the end of it and gone, it's a waste of time. I mean, that's not to say it will never happen, but I think clearly some it's much more significant than others, but all of them take something from it. So that's definitely a plus. I always ask all my podcast guests 2 questions that are at the end here. The first one is, what's been the most memorable event of your career / life so far?
Okay. In the memorable would probably be quite early on in my career, because we went through the 2008-2009 financial crisis early on into my career. And at that point, I was working for Deloitte, funnily enough, at that point, and there was this shift in the business as to the kind of work we were doing, which wasn't necessarily aligned with what I was there for. So I went into the risk services team over there to bring about a lot of the quantitative side of things, which was in the Middle East, in Dubai, where I was working. And I came in very much focused on the special projects, worked on ERM work, enterprise risk management, and being more of the quant on the team. And then when the financial crisis happened, because of the work that we had been booked for becoming a bit more dicey in terms of people wanting to spend from their budget, we started getting pushed into more internal audit roles, which wasn't necessarily what I was used to. Like for someone who comes from a quantitative background, looking at words in an Excel sheet is very frustrating, because you say words are meant to be for Word, but in Excel, I'm very much driven to the data analysis and the numbers side. And I was getting pushed into that. And I remember that was the point where I had no other job secured at that point. But I felt this sense that I would not want to do the work that I'm doing in the long run. So I felt that the only way that I would push myself to go and look for a role would be to quit in the height of the financial crisis. And that's when the partner at Deloitte was very understanding. He was a bit surprised because he just told me that, are you sure you're making the right decision given that the height of financial crisis? And look, I am no value to you while I'm doing the work that I'm not really enjoying, something that I am not going to provide any value in. And in Dubai, you had to have an employer has to kind of sponsor your visa. And he said, is there anything we can do for you? I said, the only thing that you can do for me is probably just hold on to my visa while I look for a job. But I'll give me a 3-month deadline, and after that you can cancel the visa. And I think that was the point where I went out looking for jobs. And I remember my next job was with the American Life Insurance Company, which then got acquired by MetLife. And I went through 12 interviews with them to be able to get that role. And I think that that was a very, very interesting time in my life where I was getting other job offers, but I was like, no, I just want this one. And my dad was, what is wrong with you at that point? He goes like, why didn't you just go for security for once in your life? And for me, it was like, it's now or never. I'm still young. What's the worst that can happen? And I'm very glad I made that move, because that company became a catalyst for my personal growth, for my academic growth, and also my career growth, and moving continents with them, and moving to the UK with them. And it was definitely one of the best jobs I've ever had. So it's been one which is worth it.
Yeah, it reminds me of a line from Top Gun, the movie, where it's, if you're quitting in the middle of the financial crisis, gutsiest move I ever saw. But I think actually it's really interesting that you did that, because one of the other things I talk about quite a lot to people is throughout my military career, I measured myself, if you like, by two things. One was enjoying what I did. And I never had a problem with that to the day I left. And the second one was looking in the mirror and being content with the reflection that looked back at me. And effectively, by that I mean, was what I was doing measuring up to my own value set? Was I content with what I was doing? And that became harder as I got more senior, as I got to a position where I was effectively trying to sell the Kool-Aid to people that I wouldn't necessarily want to drink myself, because we face significant constant drawdown in resources and some really pressured decisions that you knew if you're going to. In the military world anyway, it's if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And essentially you can't, there's no other option. If you don't like which way it's going, then you just got to leave. Exactly. But I think that enjoying what you do thing is so important. If you don't do that, and I've had lots of conversations with people in various courses, in various environments where that you can tell they're struggling with what they're doing, and they're just kind of nervous about making the jump. So life's too short. You don't want to get to the stage where you're my age and you look back and go, I really wish I'd done something different. If you're, fine, don't necessarily be completely extreme about it, but actively look and go and find something that is going to be enjoyable, because that's much, much more important ultimately than just because you're earning whatever money you're earning, or because you feel it's the right thing to do, whatever. If those things come as well, that's great. But if it's just because you're chasing the something that isn't about enjoyment, that's a mistake, I think.
I completely agree with that. It makes a big difference in who you are, and I think that's partially one of the things that has been quite interesting as well, because my when I started on this entrepreneurship journey, my wife was a bit skeptical of the whole thing, and I because her father was in business, and he she had the view of business as to like there is no work-life balance, and you're always thinking about business, and that's the only thing you're thinking about. And ever since I started business, and she goes like, I didn't expect what the new you. I said, what do you mean? She goes like, you seem calmer than when you used to work in full-time employment. You take I realize that there are stresses, but you're not internalizing those stresses. You're able to compartmentalize. And the honest truth is it's just because I enjoy it, and because this is the kind of this stress I enjoy, because I can control it. Whereas certain other stresses in employment, I felt like I would have to. Over here, when I stress about something, it's about survival of the business. Over there, I'm stressing about someone's emotions towards me, or how they may feel about me if I was to do something. So I think it's a completely different stress. But for me, this is much more manageable than the other one. So it's what you enjoy most.
Yeah, no. That's another great example. I think my wife would say she just never sees me anyway. So, because I do spend an awful lot of time thinking about the business and spending time sat in my home office doing stuff, and I'm guilty of that. And I know that I'm not necessarily the best at work-life balance in that space. My very last question to you is: what's the most difficult question you've ever been asked?
I think there is a question. Yeah, throughout my life, and now more and more recently, is when you asked. It's a question that you get asked very regularly. Actually, it's a question that is, "Are you sure?" And it's pretty much with whatever decision that you are making. The reality of the matter is, being an actuary, I come from a risk management and risk assessment, risk analysis perspective. So whenever I look at things, I look at all the risks and the opportunities. And I'm evaluating all options before I get into it. And you make the decision based on the information you have available. But the reality is, sometimes as a leader, when you're asked, "Are you sure?" the reality of the fact is you're not. There are a lot of external factors that will impact that decision, and it's just you setting and it's more about the response to that question that's hard for me, because I'm a very transparent person. But it's about, how do you confidently tell someone you're not sure about the outcome of something, but at the same time they should trust the process and you will get something out of it. I think that's where I struggle most in terms of questioning. So the number of times I get asked that question is like, "Are you sure this is the right decision?" And the reality is like, "No, I'm not sure, but let's just trust the process and we'll
give it a try." Yeah.
But I don't think that comes across very strong from a leadership style perspective. But I guess it's about communication and being able to have that open line of communication with people you work.
Yeah, and I think the whole dealing with ambiguity and working. I mean, I've lived half my life like that. Where you're working with imperfect information, you've got to turn around and make some pretty crunchy decisions sometimes, and that is the role of the leader. Definitely, is to turn around and be as sure as you can be before you go down a particular route, but that doesn't mean you're very sure at all. Sometimes you're really not that sure. So no, I'd say that's a great answer. Hey, Komeil, it's been fantastic. I'm really grateful. I knew it would be really interesting to have a chat with you, and I'm extremely grateful for your time. Thank you very much indeed.
The pleasure has been all mine. Thank you very much for making this time for me. Thank you.
Not at all. Delighted. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.